I didn't get my mic ready. Whoops, my bad, guys. Hello, what's up? It's me, Tsubasa, back with another video. And today we have an entry. You're welcome. I know you guys like the entries. I like them too because it's the one time I actually sit down to think about what I'm writing instead of rambling off the top of my noggin like a complete lunatic. Anyway, before we get into that, I do have one drawing. I don't believe I showed it in my last entry video. This one is from the 29th of March 2025, and this is basically just a combination of a bunch of my sketches that I made. I went all out on just filling up the page. You can see off to the side I have a little side profile, a front sketch of someone, a little chibi bear thing up there, some other sketches as well. I think I did a really good job with the pepper and the little guy in the middle being squeezed to death. And as you can tell, in this corner is Jodio Joestar from JoJo Lands, and he knocked over this blueberry or small tomato guy's cup that was filled with water, which is why the pepper lady is laughing, because she is mean and she is evil. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into today's entry from April 3rd of 2025. After weeks of putting it off, I finally finished Exodus. The first half of it was good, but the second half dragged on for so long. The reason for this is because Moses describes the construction of the Ark of the Covenant twice in great detail. If only he made drawings so we could accurately build one. So far in my journey, though, through the Bible, I've been a bit skeptical of the Old Testament. The reason for this is because the first 4 to 5 books were all written by Moses. In this manner, Moses could have made everything up, and those who wrote after him had a similar vision in mind. This is akin to what happens in the later half of Death Note. Yes, I just called the Bible similar to Death Note. Now, for all I know, Moses could have been the recorder of all this information, writing down stories that were told for hundreds of years orally. However, we then get to Exodus, where he is in many ways the main character. As a scribe, would he be so proud of himself as to self-insert himself? Or is he merely telling the truth? I mean, let's be real. My entries tell the truth at the cost of me being the main character, so maybe it was the same for Moses. Maybe I should put my faith in Moses as he did for God. Isn't this just interesting now, right? Because I'm looking at the Bible from the perspective of, this is my religion that I grew up with. I want to figure out why people like this book so much, and I want to finish reading it because it's the one book in my book collection I haven't finished reading and or started properly. So for me, there's a couple reasons why I'm reading this, but as I'm reading this, I'm also keeping a bit of a skeptical eye. The bit of the engineer and scientist within me does think that it is a bit weird that there's like one person who's written like the very beginning like books of the Bible, and it's not like how it is in the Older Testament where, you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 4 people who have witnessed Jesus living, to which Jesus did exist back in the day. Like, there's proof. But for Moses to, have all these things happen to him throughout Exodus, part of me does think that he is just a very observant person. For instance, when the Red Sea parts, maybe he has been through the Red Sea area multiple times and has figured out that there is a bit of a pattern to the tides rising and falling. Now, I've never been to the Red Sea, and maybe the Red Sea is quite deep everywhere, and quite literally there is no shallow area where the tide would go low enough to be able to walk through the Red Sea. But nonetheless, if there is, then Moses could have been a very observant person and known when those tides would lower. Similarly, when he goes up to the mountain to basically make the 10 Commandments, nobody else is there with him besides himself and God, supposedly. Now, again, Moses could have created the 10 Commandments himself, just from a moral aspect. If he had the idea of what would a good person morally do, and through thinking that, he created the 10 Commandments, then God was never a part of that picture. Maybe Moses was trying to create the idea of what a perfect person should be, and in so created God. Now I'm taking this all in, and at the same time, I also think about it like an author. I think that the story that Moses has written so far is actually quite engaging and quite fun to read, and the lessons and rules that are set up, I believe, are good morals to have, that if a God were to exist and be perfect, that those would be the rules that he would write. So whether Moses had made these books with the idea that there is God, or God truly did come to him, can be put into question, I feel like. Now, I wrote a paper a long time ago in my philosophy class that I took, in which I had an argument to say that God is a thought. And this was like a 1-page paper, but I wanted to address a couple of things and a couple of arguments that people had for God not existing. Because one thing that people say is, if God is all powerful, why doesn't he do anything about the evil in the world? And one person could read the argument and say, well, God gave us free will. In that case, he's kind of letting us play the pieces how we want to. But another idea that I had is, if God is a thought amongst the human collective, then there would be no way that he could change evil unless if good people were to do good things and try and convert those evil people into good. If that makes sense. God exists in the collective people's mind, and therefore, even if someone were to say God doesn't exist, they still acknowledge that there is an idea of God, or there is some thought of God, and therefore God cannot die until the idea of God himself dies. There are a couple of points that I had in that paper as well. I can't remember from the top of my head, but I do recall that I thought it was a pretty alright paper for how I thought about it. And to me, it's a little bit how I view God. I mean, when I do pray, because I keep my longest streak with God, the man up there, I do the praying thing, and I think about, praying and looking up to the sky. But, if God is a thought, then shouldn't I be looking into my own head, not having to raise my head? But I feel like a part of that is just, societal. We all know the whole, cross, and then you look up to the sky to God to give thanks. And personally for me, if I were to say God were something, I'd say God is the sky. Because for me, I'm always fascinated by the beauty that the sky brings, with its sunsets, sunrises, its midday hues, and its nights. Although I do want to see starry nights and aurora borealis, those being explained scientifically, but nonetheless still provided to be beauty within the sky. Anywho, going back to Moses, and the connection I made with myself is, personally for me, if Moses is doing what I'm doing right now, which is creating these accounts of my life, why would I want to lie? because at the end of the day, I'm trying to give some sort of message, just as he is, to everyone who reads the Bible. And so for me to make something up would put me in a bit of a hypocritical light, because then you don't know if you can trust me. And I personally want to create the connection that you could to some degree, despite being on a screen. And so maybe Moses was thinking the same thing, but writing it down on paper. And maybe he was aware that not everyone's going to trust the words that come out of his mouth, and he was fine with that. At that point, he found content. And maybe at that point, he was okay with those who wouldn't follow, because in his mind, they have not seen God. Why would they believe unless they wanted to put faith towards it? Their own free will, their own decision to do so. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about religion for a little bit. I think it's always an interesting topic to talk about, and I feel like my stance on it is a little bit different than most Catholic people, especially with my idea that God is a thought and not some ultra powerful being looming over the sky. But it does come into question then, what do I think heaven is, right? Because if God is supposed to be up in heaven, then what is heaven? And like I said earlier, how I think that God, if would be anything, it would be the sky, then heaven is the sky. We are living within God, which would be beautiful, Anyhow, I'm going to end it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, because I'm curious what you guys have to say about what I talked about today, especially because I feel like this topic was a little bit more interesting than some of the other entries in the past. And I do want to get some discussion going. I want this to maybe pick up a little bit more traction than most of my videos. Reason being is that I want my most viewed video to not be the fly one. I don't know why out of all the videos I made, it became the how flies made me see a cultural difference. That was such an interesting video, and I did not expect it to blow up like that. But I would like this one to blow up, if any of the videos I've made recently. I think this one has been by far one of the most introspective and thought-provoking entries. So let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see more of my daily life and thoughts and other miscellaneous things and wacky and weird stuff. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Peace.